The end of the public sector pay freeze. It's announced that millions, including teachers, soldiers and police officers, will get a raise next year. And with prices also rising, ministers admit some will still be out of pocket.
It's not for me as a junior minister to guarantee anything, but what I'm saying is that the Chancellor is signalling the fact that he wants to give the public sector, the 5 million people in the public sector, a pay rise.
Also tonight, the Queen back at work virtually, but the Palace says she won't be attending the Glasgow Climate Summit. Calling for change, a damning report into the state of England's social housing after the ITV News expose. And just the ticket to all aboard the biggest little railway in Britain.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. The cost of living was once again the battleground today over what's likely to be making the headlines in tomorrow's budget. The Chancellor confirmed that he will be ending the government's year-long public sector pay freeze in his budget speech. And this paves the way for possible wage increases next year for the likes of nurses, teachers and the police. But a row blew up when a government minister refused to guarantee that any such pay rises would be above the level of inflation. Critics say that could mean an effective pay cut. Here's our political correspondent, Libby Vina.
They are the public servants who've kept the country going during the pandemic. But only health workers got a pay rise. Others working in the public sector got nothing. Now the government says the freeze is over. Craig Robson, a prison officer in Durham, is among those who hasn't had a pay rise.
The cost of living, food has gone up, petrol's gone up by 30 pence a litre. Next year, national insurance contributions are going up in April with no increase on the wages. So all I've asked the peer review body is, can they please tell us how I'm going to do that?
There are 5.68 million public sector workers. Rising inflation means they've got poorer over the last decade. An NHS hospital consultant's pay has effectively fallen by nearly 9%. For nurses, the figure is around 5%. Senior civil servants' real wages are down by nearly 11%. And compared with 2007, a teacher now earns 8% less. Given inflation is now 3%, will the pay rise next year be more than that? This minister wouldn't be drawn.
What I can't do at the moment is speculate 6 months ahead, but what we're saying is that the Chancellor, by ending the pay freeze, gives the signal to the pay review bodies that they can...
But you can't guarantee that they will be better off next year.
Well, it's not for me as a junior minister to guarantee anything, but what I'm saying is that the Chancellor is signalling the fact that he wants to give the public sector, the 5 million people in the public sector, a pay rise.
But in all the leaks over the budget, Labour says the cost of living crisis has been ignored.
In recent days, we have read thousands of words about what the Chancellor plans to do, but the silence is deafening on the soaring bills and rising prices facing families and businesses.
At this school in Leicester, the head teacher says staff will welcome an end to the pay freeze, whatever they get.
I think at the moment anything would be better than nothing. I think when faced with 0%, which is what teachers were told this year, then obviously that's not any incentive. And certainly I think will have impacted on recruitment and retention of teachers.
Whether the Chancellor, who released these photos of himself working on his speech tonight, has more to offer public sector workers will become clear tomorrow. Libby Vina, ITV News, Westminster.
And our political editor, Robert Peston, is here. Now, Robert, we seem to have had an awful lot of this budget announced already, most of it good news. So does that mean he's saving the bad news for tomorrow?
I mean, yes, I actually did a quick check. I think I've had 15 press releases about the budget from the Treasury. The normal convention is they don't say anything about the budget ahead of time. I think it's partly why the Speaker of the House of Commons is so cross with Rishi Sunak. However, I think he has held quite a lot back. What we've had is mostly divvying up about, there's 100 billion or so committed in terms of capital spending, and we've had announcements related to some of that. But what people are really interested in is the day-to-day spending. Where now we know there's a massive surge coming for health. The real question is, what else is it going to be for other priorities, local authorities, law and order, and the rest of it? Now, the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, tells the government how much money there is to spend, and I understand that the OBR will be a bit more optimistic than people think. So I suspect he will be more generous than people have been expecting. And you have to put that against a backdrop that we already know that he was promising to spend 3% more than the rate of inflation on day-to-day spending anyway, which takes us back to the kind of spending we saw during New Labour, much more than we saw under the austerity years. So yes, we've had lots of pre-announcements, but I do think there's quite a lot more to come tomorrow.
OK, Robert Peston, thank you. And for full coverage of the budget and reaction from Robert and indeed others, do join Tom Bradby from 12:15 tomorrow. Now, within the last hour, Buckingham Palace has announced that the Queen will not be attending the climate change conference in Glasgow next week. It follows advice for her to rest. And our political reporter, Shihab Khan, is in Westminster. Shihab, this just came at 6 o'clock, didn't it? What more do we know?
So, as you say, this is following the advice that the Queen has been given to rest and only undertake light duties. She spent a night in hospital only a few days ago. She has recommenced light duties already. She held some virtual audiences with a number of ambassadors today, but she won't be doing the trip to Glasgow to attend COP26. We understand she will be doing a video message instead for all the delegates and all the world leaders that attend there. She was set to attend an evening reception. This will be a disappointment for the Prime Minister in particular, who's been talking up and gearing towards COP26 for some time. It is a big moment with leaders around the world gathering here in the United Kingdom, in Glasgow, to deal with one of the biggest issues that the country and the world faces, something which is very high on the Prime Minister's agenda. And the Queen being there is a big attraction. Think back to so many world leaders over the years who've come to the United Kingdom. They talk about meeting the Queen. Donald Trump, not long ago, when he came to visit the United Kingdom, he was so keen to sit down with the Queen. So it is a big attraction. The hope will be that this doesn't dissuade any of the world leaders from coming. People should still be keen to attend. That's the message that we'd be getting from politicians. And the hope is that it is still a big success and that the video message is well received nonetheless. OK, Shihab at Westminster. Thank you. Now, a damning official report into the state of social housing in England following an ITV News investigation was published today. The Housing Ombudsman said he had been shocked by our series, exposing the appalling conditions under which many tenants are forced to live. His report demands changes in culture, behaviour and approach from councils and housing associations. Let's get more now from our political correspondent, Daniel Hewitt.
We have black mould on the walls. This is just one part of it I'm showing you.
It's now been going on over 4 years. The mould and wet walls.
Our ceiling has collapsed.
These are the tenants who've contacted ITV News in their thousands with images of squalid homes riddled with mould and damp. Now, in a damning report, England's Housing Ombudsman says landlords have failed to act, not taking complaints seriously and wrongly shifted the blame onto tenants.
Yes, I have been shocked. And that's why I think we're being really clear here that there needs to be a zero-tolerance approach, there needs to be a change in culture, there needs to be a change in behaviours. So it's things like empathy and treating people with respect.
You shouldn't have to tell landlords to care and respect their tenants, should you?
No, you're right.
The inquiry began in April, after our investigation found families in squalid conditions in Croydon and across England, their complaints ignored for years. In its own investigation of 142 housing associations and councils, the Ombudsman found landlords lacked empathy and respect for tenants, automatically blaming them for damp and mould, and inaction, excessive delays and poor communication. Its 26 recommendations include improving complaint systems and more proactive property inspections.
I feel like it's taken over my life.
None of today's report is a shock to Shireen. For years, mould and damp have dominated her two-bedroom flat in South London, scarring the ceiling as her one-year-old sleeps below, spreading across the bathroom and the living room, where black sacks protect the children's toys from ever-growing spores.
Everything just gets affected by the damp and the mould. You just see like green mould patches on your clothes and everything. The smell is just horrible. I'm tired. I'm really tired of this situation.
Her housing association, Peabody, say overcrowding is to blame and have tried to work with Shireen to temporarily move her out to fix the problems. But she says in the past, workers have just washed it off and repainted and has lost faith in a permanent solution.
Have you ever complained to the Housing Ombudsman about this?
No.
Do you even know the Housing Ombudsman exists?
No, I don't.
Aren't you, as the Ombudsman, partly at fault for this? because tenants are either not coming to you because they don't know you exist, or because they feel that you won't do anything about it.
Over this year, we've seen a substantial increase in the number of complaints that we're receiving. I think where anyone goes to the media or court to try and get their problem resolved, something's fundamentally gone wrong.
But social housing tenants have long known something is fundamentally wrong. They're hoping the people paid to deal with it now do something about it. Daniel Hewitt, ITV News.
Bit of news about coronavirus now. A total of nearly 140,000 people in the UK have now died within 28 days of testing positive for the virus. Today's figures show a further 263 deaths reported within the last 24 hours, the highest daily number since March the 3rd. But it does include, we're told, 3 days' worth of data from Wales due to reporting delays. Now, the Met Police says it will apologise in person to the family of 2 murdered sisters after the police watchdog criticised the initial missing persons inquiry. The bodies of Nicole Smallman and Biba Henry were eventually found in a North London park by members of their own family. Their mother said the time for apologies had long gone. Rebecca Barry reports.
One of the last photos of these sisters alive. Shortly after, Biba Henry and Nicole Smallman were murdered. But it was their loved ones who found their bodies after organising their own search party because the Met Police failed to respond.
There seemed to be no sense of urgency.
Their mother spoke to ITV News earlier this year.
We had to do the missing persons. We had to track down who was at the picnic, and then it kind of spiralled into your worst nightmare.
You're under arrest.
It was Daniel Hussein who stabbed the sisters in a park in Wembley, but the police watchdog has found the Met failed in its handling of initial missing persons reports and says the service the family received was unacceptable. In a statement, the Met Police Commissioner, Dame Cressida Dick, expressed her deepest sympathies, admitting that if the force had responded better, it may have saved their family and friends immeasurable pain. "I'm very sorry," she says, "that the level of service we provided fell short." But that apology, says Biba and Nicole's mother, comes 10 months too late. The report says there was no evidence of racial bias, but she's always disagreed.
Race and class, 2 women of colour out doing who knows what, where and when, and they'll turn up.
Shabnam Chowdhury was one of the Met's most senior female Asian officers.
I do think that there are issues around racially profiling communities, particularly the Black and the Asian communities. And whilst the IOPC have stated that it didn't, the fact is there is evidence, certainly from my perspective and the perspective of many people from the Black community.
Action will be taken over the staff involved, but Biba and Nicole's family insist they're not the only ones who suffered mental anguish at the hands of the Met Police. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News. Fighting back, the students boycotting pubs and clubs in protest at the surge in spiking. And tributes to the former Scotland and Rangers manager, Walter Smith. Those stories and more after the break. Join me then. And welcome back. Students across the UK are this week organising boycotts of bars and nightclubs in protest at the recent surge in people being spiked. Durham, where several victims have reported being drugged while out socialising, is one place staging a night-in protest tonight. From there, Sangeeta Lal reports.
Preparing for a night out for so many now means preparing for things to go wrong. Reports of spiking are rising not just across Durham, but the whole country. Yet there's little understanding about what people are being given or why it's happening. Something Ella is still trying to figure out after she says her drink was spiked 2 weeks ago.
I was having hot and cold sweats, I was sweating a lot even outside, and it was 10 degrees.
I was just collapsing everywhere and couldn't really stand up or walk. I always thought it would be a targeted attack and with the motivation for an assault or for a theft, but we haven't seen any of that in Durham at the moment. It's not just girls being spiked, it's all genders.
Police say the rise in reports could be because of a rise in awareness about the crime, but whatever the reason, it's something people warn must stop. Students here say almost every week now they're hearing reports of people who believe they've been spiked. And now they want to put pressure on venues to tackle the problem, holding a mass night in across the country because protesters say they're becoming too scared to go out.
We need to show that it's not okay, like not only guys can go out, but it's not even that. Just that it can't be just a one-night thing, it has to be like a few days.
Something needs to stop and change. Like, this is almost a wake-up call now. Like, we can't carry on like this.
It's a fear the owners of this bar in Durham know its customers feel, now taking extra precautions to prevent people from being spiked.
So for our larger drinks of pints, we have lids to go on top of your pint cup and straw can go through. Stoppers for the bottles, stickers to go on top of the smaller cups. As a business, we have done everything we possibly can to prevent anything happening, and that's all we can do, really, and we hope other venues can follow suit.
These precautions come at a cost, but worth every penny, Cheryl says, who's also closing tonight in support of students who are reaching out by staying in. Sangeeta Lal, ITV News.
Quick look at other news now, and in a report which is likely to set the tone for the Glasgow Climate Summit, the UN says international efforts to cut carbon emissions are falling far short of what is needed. The report concludes that the world's temperature is on course to rise by 2.7 degrees this century. It says this would have catastrophic consequences. Prince Andrew's legal team has agreed to a time frame in which the Duke will answer questions under oath in a civil sexual assault case being brought against him in America. Virginia Giuffre accuses the Duke of York of sexually assaulting her in 2001. He vehemently denies the accusations. And the former Conservative Minister Owen Paterson is facing a month's suspension from the Commons after the parliamentary watchdog said he had breached lobbying rules. Mr Paterson, who denies any wrongdoing, hit back at the inquiry, saying it was unfair and had contributed to his wife's suicide last year. Now, it is not often, is it? The football tribes of Glasgow speak as one, but they came together today in paying tribute to Walter Smith, one of the all-time great figures of the game in Scotland. Mr Smith, who's died aged 73, won 10 league titles as manager of Rangers, and their big Glasgow rival, Celtic, were among the first to express sympathy today. Our Scotland correspondent Peter Smith reports.
That is Walter Smith's Rangers.
Asked what his footballing philosophy was as Rangers manager, Walter Smith answered, just win. He certainly stayed true to his beliefs. Winning a total of 21 trophies for the club, he is one of Scotland's most successful managers of all time. And at the news of his passing today, aged 73, everyone at Rangers stopped.
He gave many, many years to this football club. He loved the club, he was honest, he was genuine, and he's made me a better person, so I've got nothing but good words to say.
Walter Smith's relentless Rangers won everything in Scotland and beat English champions Leeds in a match billed the Battle of Britain. Ali McCoist was his star striker, and he spoke today about supporting Smith through cancer and the legacy he leaves.
The greatest manager of all time in the club's history, and it'll take a wee while to sink in. I just, I knew it was coming.
He also had a spell at Everton and answered the call to manage his country. But Walter Smith is best remembered at Ibrox by friends and foes.
Mr Rangers. He's one of the names you just associate with Rangers.
Well, he means everything to this club. That's what he means.
How did you react when you heard the news?
Just devastated.
Walter Smith said he managed the club he loved.
I've supported the club since I was a boy, and I just love being here.
His passing now takes a storied part of British football with him.
Tributes to Walter Smith, the former Rangers and Scotland manager whose death was announced today. And finally, the lockdown was a pretty difficult time, wasn't it, for many of us? But for some, it came as a golden opportunity. Simon George, for one, he finished his dream project, creating a massive and yet minutely detailed model railway. Hannah Miller went to meet him.
A journey back in time on Britain's biggest model railway. This 55-metre recreation of the Calder Valley line has all the hallmarks of a hobby that got somewhat out of hand.
I didn't really mean it to be the biggest, it was just how it panned out. It was just a case of not just making it big, but making it really detailed, so it's just like a photographic image in 3D of the real place.
The railway uses 3 miles of model track and 8 miles of cable.
So the grass is actually Russian doll's hair, would you believe? The water on the river, it's like a varnish resin type material.
And from the British Rail logo hand-painted on the back of a worker's shirt to the Ford escorts being ferried along, every detail transports Simon back to the 1980s.
That's you?
That is me, yeah.
Spotting trains at a railway junction when he was a young boy.
I just wanted to recreate the place I used to go to as a child. Being back in 1983 when Maggie was in number 10 and Duran Duran were in the charts. So it was just an eccentric way of reliving my past.
The project cost around £250,000 and has been 8 years in the making.
During lockdown, I was down here 10 hours a day because it actually enabled me to really get cracking with it and finish it.
What do your friends and family think of it all?
I think I'm crazy.
There are plans to take the railway on the road to cities across the country, though it'll need to be packed into 3 articulated lorries to get around. This train could shortly be arriving at a large exhibition space near you. Hannah Miller, ITV News, Wakefield.
It'd have to be quite a large space, wouldn't it? Well, that's it for now. Tom will be here at 10, but from me and all the team, bye-bye.